Okay, welcome back. Again, small audience. I suppose it has something to do with the party last night, so it's very great that you're here. And I'm very happy that we have a speaker who's not on the list, which is printed. Tim just jumped in spontaneously, so I think you can all imagine how much courage it takes to jump in, although it seems like you're quite prepared for doing a presentation.
So. I've done this before.
Okay. And in the next 12 minutes, we will hopefully learn something about fintech. So please put your hands together for a loud applause for Tim Sievers.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Tim Sievers. I'm CEO and founder of Deposit Solutions. And I brought a few slides, so I'll tell you a little bit about what we do, and then we can jump right into questions. So with Deposit Solutions, we are building the new infrastructure for savings deposits, and maybe just sort of, starting with a bit of, interesting. The clicker doesn't seem to work, but I can do this without slides, so it's not a problem. So a bit of terminology first. What are deposits? Deposits are simple savings products. So it's what everyone can put their money into when they want to be sure they get it back, plus an interest. So it's typically an overnight account or a fixed term account or a notice account, so Tagesgeld, Festgeld, Kündigungsgeld in German. And they're typically deposit insured. And that's the saver's perspective. But for banks, deposits are a super important funding source. So about 40% of European banks' balance sheets are funded through deposits, right? So it's relevant for both these parties. And what's interesting about deposits is that while not many people, if you ask them on the street, will think this is a super sexy product category, it turns out it's got a few features that make it actually very interesting to start a business in. One is what I said earlier, it's super relevant, both for savers and for banks. In Germany, about 30 million people own such products, right? So it's super relevant. Secondly, it's very underserved. So arguably the last innovation in the space has been online banking. Right? So it's actually, if you use it as a saver, it's not working very well. For the bank, it isn't working so well either, which is what I'll come to in a minute. But then finally, it's a huge market. It's one of the largest markets, if not the largest market there is. So in Germany alone, 2,000 billion euros are held in deposits, right? That's a number with a lot of zeros. In Europe, it's more than 10,000 billion. And in the whole world, it's 50,000 billion, 50 trillion US dollars. So it's a very large market and a very relevant problem. Now the clicker even works, so I can show you some slides. So we've gone through this. Right, this is what I said. It's a large market. So the problem is it's not served very well. It doesn't work well for savers nor for banks. Why? Because every bank needs to build and operate a full retail infrastructure in order to take retail deposits. So that means they need a bank system capable of opening and running individual accounts for retail customers. They need a tax engine as part of that. They need the custom operations and the back-end operations of handling all these things. And then they also need to run and operate a point of sale. So, either in the branches or a website to interact with the customers, right? So for the banks, this is a lot of work for something that's just part of your funding mix, right? You might not even be doing this for any other products than for the funding products. And for the savers, it means that they have to actually open an account, even though they just want to use a product. They have to actually go to that bank and open an account. And some of you here in the room may have done that in the past. It's not fun. Also, it means that they are limited in their choice to the products that are in their local market, right? So that are actually presented to them wherever they are at that particular moment. So it doesn't work well for both sides. And if you then also take a step back and look at the value chain as a whole, how does the industry fare? It turns out it's super inefficient, because with 5 banks and 5 savers, you actually end up with 25 accounts, right? So each bank duplicates the same thing for every individual saver. So this isn't great, and that's the problem we solve basically. And how do we do this? Effectively, we offer deposit funding in a deposits as a service model. So instead of running the whole value chain themselves, banks can list their products on our platform, and then through our platform they reach a whole range of point of sale situations, and they don't have to run the infrastructure or the operation or the point of sale, right? So it makes it really easy for the deposit taker to use this product category, and as a consequence also for the saver, the user experience is transformed because our platform has the other side to it as well, where point of sale owners like the home banks, like Deutsche Bank for instance, or savings banks, can implement our platform into their offering and then offer to their customers third-party deposit products under the existing client relationship. So that means for the user experience, you don't actually have to, if you want to use a deposit product of another bank, you don't have to go to that bank and open an account. You can just stay within your home bank environment and actually use this deposit product like you would buy a share. Select the product, type in how much you want to place, and then authorize the transaction. Right? So this really changes the user experience for the saver dramatically, and for the point of sale owner. Again, we're talking about your typical home bank, like the large incumbents or the challenger banks, or even non-banks who can play this product category with our platform. For them, it means that even though they might not have the best product off their own balance sheet, they can still service the customer competitively in this very relevant banking product category, and the customer stays with them and they earn a commission income, right? So it actually can be an important part of a financial point of sale strategy where someone wants to be the hub for his customers' financial service needs. Right, so here are the two propositions that I just spoke about. On the one hand, our customers are deposit-taking bank, so every banks need to fund themselves. Deposits are an important part of that funding mix. Whatever else you do, also list your products on our platform because it'll gain you extra distribution reach. You'll increase the addressable market and diversify the risk position of your funding. So this is a no-brainer. Okay, so that's one side, the deposit-taking side. They list their products on our platform. Also, they pay us. The business model is that deposit-taking banks pay us for the funding volume we get them through our platform. And then the other side is what you see here on the right. That's the second part of our proposition. The second sort of customer group we're facing in this platform is what we call the point of sale owners. So Deutsche Bank has already implemented this in their offering. For those of you who are Deutsche Bank customers, you can look it up in the online banking. There's a tab called Zinsmarkt. That's us. The cooperative banks, so Volks- and Raiffeisenbanken, there are many who have also implemented this already. But this is just your regular home bank that can implement our platform. They are our second customer group, so to speak. And what's interesting also for us as a business is, while you may be able to imagine, I started the company, so I quit my job in 2010, right? So we've been at it for some time to pursue this idea full time, and it took us until about 2014 to get it live, right? It was really hard to start because firstly it was difficult to build because we do value chain redesign in a sort of complex product category, but then also it was hard to win the first customers because the deposit-taking banks said, okay, sounds great, come back when you have distribution. And the point of sale partner said, this sounds interesting, come back when you have products on the shelf, right? So it was difficult to start, but now with more partners on both sides, we actually gain a lot of traction because for the deposit taker, our proposition is now that we have many point of sale partners signed up to this, much more relevant than it used to be because they have huge reach. About 30 million customers can use products on our platform without opening a new bank account. Right? So this is quite powerful for the treasurer. And also for the point of sale partners, the more product banks are on the platform, the more attractive is the proposition. So you get real network effects, and that helps us now to accelerate our growth. And by the way, as part of so how did we crack this chicken and egg problem when it was very hard to find the first users? We started our own point of sale called Zinspilot.de, can also go look it up on the internet, where customers can open an account once, and then they can use all the products on our platform with that one bank account. It's run by a service bank, actually local Hamburg. The Zuto Bank is the service bank partner. You open one Zinspilot account, and then you can, with that one account, use all products of all, I don't know, 30 banks or so that list their products on Zinspilot. Right? So, and with that, we had a point of sale partner. With that, we were able to build a product portfolio, and then also win first third-party point of sales. But it was quite an act. Okay, so my time's almost up. Maybe just a few words on the companies where we stand today. We're about 300 people now, most of them in Hamburg. I'd say about probably 220 or so in Hamburg. And then we have a small office in Berlin also, where we acquired a company a few years back. And then, yeah, across Europe we have sort of small offices, typically sort of sales offices. We work with about 100 partners now from 17 countries. Earlier this year we launched in Switzerland. I realized very quickly after starting the company that my own pockets weren't deep enough to see this through in terms of funding. So we took on venture capital to finance the growth of the company. What I like to point out usually is that those are just sort of regular financial investors, so no one with a sort of strategic agenda or so. I think today that's less relevant for us. In fact, we come into now a sort of phase of our growth where it might be relevant or okay even to invite industry partners to own their own infrastructure or co-own their own infrastructure. But at the beginning, I found it important that we aren't just, bank X or Y gig, and we're sort of associated too closely with one strategic partner. So we are all financial investors in the cap table, and yeah, and I think that's us. Even though I have 40 seconds left, I would open the floor to questions.
Thank you very much, Tim. Questions from your side? Yeah. That was fast.
I have two questions actually. The first is regarding Zinspilot. As you mentioned, you used to crack the hen and egg problem earlier. So what's your take on the future of Zinspilot? Is this still relevant for you? Are you still making money with it, or is it costing you money because the customer acquisition costs are so high?
Yeah, with Zinspilot always gets a bad deal because I talk about it like it was this sort of thing that we just used to start. And it tells you how we tick, because our DNA is sort of B2B. The vision is to create a middleware for deposit-taking banks and points of sale to use. And Zinspilot is just one point of sale, right? But what's nice about Zinspilot is that it's also a great standalone business. So we've now just recently cracked the 200,000 customer mark. This is almost exclusively in Germany, 200,000 customers. We have mediated, I think, now more than 14 billion euros in deposits. It's super profitable. One of the few fintech players, I think, that is actually earning good cash on the unit economics basis, without reliance on sort of cross-selling later. Right? So I think it's a great standalone business, and I don't do it justice by talking about it like I did just earlier. And we will continue to do this. In fact, as you probably know, we've put this into a separate company, and it's run by a separate management team. So it actually acts a little bit like a customer of our platform, right? So we've actually also separated the business to some extent, and this is sort of I think a great standalone business to develop further. It's got lots of headroom for growth. Also, we're starting to internationalize it, but that's, I guess, in our middleware story, our core story, Zinspilot has the role of a liquidity maker.
And you're holding still 100% of the shares of Zinspilot, of that company? Yeah. Okay.
As in, not me personally, but Deposit Solutions has 100% of the shares in Zavido GmbH, which is the operator of Zinspilot.
My second question is on internationalization. You're expanding to the US, and you've shown this global map, or the 12 on Europe and 14 on the US. So, what's your reason for moving to the US? Because when we were looking into robo-advice, for example, it's the other way around. That has been growing in the US very, very quickly and rapidly, but not not in Germany and not in Europe.
Yeah.
So isn't your product a typical German product? How do you figure it works in the US? Because of a different savings culture, maybe.
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of points in the answer to your question. One is, why are we going to the US? It's opportunity driven. And it's a good question because I've already been looking at the US for about 5 years or so. And only about a year and a half ago, or in fact sort of 2 years, we've kind of intensified that. And with the funding round we did last summer, where we raised another $100 million to largely primary to accelerate the growth, we actually added and opened a small office in New York, and have now starting to make this operational. And the trade-off is, of course, do you do too much at the same time? Because Europe is a large market. You saw the numbers up there. We should, there's a good case to be made that we should focus as a small company. I mean, 300 people is a lot more than we used to be, but it's still tiny compared to all of our customers. That we should focus on Europe, really make sure we own this before doing anything else. That's the one part of the story. On the other side, it's not opportunity drove us to still do it, because we have now a sort of, as an organization, a maturity that we think we can manage. Plus, it is a large market, and it is more mature in many aspects, also in our space, but what we do doesn't exist, and we think there is a need for it. And we've now signed up the first partners, and we'll see how it goes. We're treading carefully, but it's not correct that it's a German phenomenon. I mean, as I showed you just there, even if you look at Europe as a whole, 40% of European banks' balance sheet are funded through deposits. Germany is a very large part of that, with 2,000 billion out of 10,000 billion. But even of Europe, Germany is only 20%. And in the US, you have another deposit base of, I think, 13,000 billion US dollars, depending on how you count. But you can see it's quite large, so well worth having a go at.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if there's enough time left, but what would interest me is if it's also possible to expand this great business model not only on the capital investment market. I mean, at the very moment you offer people the best deposit solution in terms of interest, which are tiny, as we all know. Isn't it possible to offer them also the broader scope of funds or capital investment?
Okay, so there is a short answer to that, so that you will be fine. So what we do is called open architecture. In fact, it's not new at all. Okay, so we are the innovator in the space of deposits. We've managed to crack how to transpose this onto deposits. But if you look at mortgage loans, for instance, you go to Deutsche Bank, Commerzbank, they'll offer you a third-party loan, right? They do that already, or with mutual funds also. A Fidelity fund, you don't have to go to Fidelity and open an account to get a Fidelity fund. You can buy it with your home bank. So this is already going on. In deposits, we are the first ones to do that. There you go.
First time I got to use it. Sorry, but thank you very much. I don't know if